Am I the asshole for not letting my girlfriend sleep with me in my bed? I, 22 male, share an apartment with my best friend Mike, 22 male, and Mike's girlfriend Daisy, 23 female. We only have 2 bedrooms. Daisy is a heavier lady. She prefers the term big boned. She also has sleep apnea. For these reasons, Daisy has her own bedroom. Mike and I share the other bedroom. I've been dating my girlfriend, Shandy, 25 female, for 4 months now. She was over at our place watching a movie with us last night and decided to spend the night. Shandy knows about our sleeping arrangements and doesn't have a problem with it, but she assumed that she'd sleep in the bed with me when she stayed over. I don't blame her for assuming this because this is the first time she spent the night, but there's only space for 1 double bed in me and Mike's bedroom, and he and I share it together. Mike has a bad back and is too tall to sleep on our couch in the living room, and it would be rude of me to ask him to give up his part of the bed for my guest. I'd sleep on the couch and let Shandy take my part of the bed, but I didn't think Mike would be comfortable with that, so I didn't offer. I told Shandy that she could sleep on the couch and I'd bring her a pillow and blankets. She asked if she could just sleep with me, and I explained to her why she couldn't. Shandy seemed fine with this, and we all went to bed normally. However, she left quickly this morning, and when I called and asked if everything was all right, she said she was a little disappointed we couldn't sleep together, and was upset that I chose Mike over her. This made me feel bad because it was never my intention to upset her, so I'm wondering if I'm the asshole for not finding a way to allow Shandy to sleep with me.
Story time about how my crazy ex-girlfriend is trying to control my life, take over my Instagram, and keeps DMing girls on Instagram to block me. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. So most of you know that this girl DM'd me and asked me to block her boyfriend. Well, I contacted her boyfriend, told her about it, and he told me his story time about her. I met my crazy ex last year. We actually started talking at a party. We live in the same city and have the same friends, so I knew about her. After the night I met her at the party, I decided to ask her out. I mean, she looked like a normal, sweet girl, but little did I know that she was gonna make my life miserable. So we started following each other on Instagram and exchanged phone numbers. We went to the beach and had a really nice first date. Again, super sweet girl. We went out on 3 more dates before I asked her to be my girlfriend. On the 4th date, she came over to my family's house and we had lunch. Of course, she made the best impression on my entire family. I mean, she kind of seemed like too good to be true, you know? She was super cool, easy to talk to, and really funny. The only person out of my family that did not like her was my sister. My sister told me that she got the impression she was only acting the way she thought I wanted her to act. I told her she was being paranoid and to give her a chance. So about 2 weeks into us dating, she started staying over at my apartment. But here's the thing, she basically moved in. She brought over a bag of clothes, her toothbrush, moisturizer and shit, like girly stuff that I just had no idea about. I didn't say anything to her, but in my mind I was like, whoa, this is moving a little too fast. A few days later, one of my friends had his bachelor party. So of course I told her that I was gonna go, and she got really mad. She told me that if she couldn't go to the party, then I shouldn't go at all. I explained to her that this party had been planned for months now. She then grabbed my phone and called my friend whose bachelor party it was, and she basically asked him if she could come. My friend thought it was super weird, but eventually said yes. So my crazy girlfriend got herself invited to the bachelor party. And guess what? It was at a trip club. So she spent the entire time telling me that she was super uncomfortable and didn't let me have fun at all. I barely spent time with my friends and the bachelor because she wanted me to stay with her because she felt so uncomfortable. I asked her if she wanted to go home and she said yes. I told her I'd go get her a cab, but she started to cry and told me that I needed to leave with her too. That's when I put my foot down. I mean, for her to show up to the party was bad enough, but now she's asking me to leave? I told her I was not going to leave with her and that she needed to give me space. She started begging and crying. I couldn't believe my eyes. She had never behaved this way before. I put her into the cab and she went home. Then she ignored me for 4 days and I had to beg her to talk to me. I told my sister what was going on and my sister got really angry. She said it wasn't normal for her to be behaving that way so early into the relationship and that I shouldn't be begging her. So I stopped. A few days later, she shows up to my apartment angry because I stopped chasing her. She told me that clearly I didn't love her. Mind you, we hadn't told each other we loved each other. When I told her I didn't love her back, she started yelling and running up and down the hallway in my apartment building. I told her to calm down and one of my neighbors came outside and asked if she was okay. She ran into my apartment and pretended like nothing had happened. This is where it gets crazy. Part 2 is up. Part 2 of how my crazy ex is trying to take over my life, my Instagram, and keeps DMing girls to block me. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. So a few days after she ran up and down my hallway acting all crazy, I asked her if she wanted to take a break. Of course she said no. And she told me the best thing was for her to move in with me. Like, what? I mean, I had one foot out the door and this girl was trying to move in. Then I just had to be honest with her. I told her I didn't like how she invited herself to my friend's bachelor party, how she ruined the night for me, and then basically acted all crazy. I mean, we had only been dating for 2 weeks at that point. She started to apologize and told me if there was anything I could do to forgive her. I felt bad for her, so I told her I'd give her a second chance. Worst decision of my life. Then she was suddenly back on her best behavior. This is when she started asking me questions about Instagram. She wanted to know who were the girls that I followed on Instagram. So I told her they were just girls that I didn't even know. Then she pulls out her phone and shows me my Instagram and starts scrolling through the list of all the people I follow. One by one, she started pulling up profiles and asking me if I knew the girls. I told her that if it bothered her that much, then she should just stop looking at my Instagram. That's when she told me she wanted to check my DMs just for her peace of mind. Of course, I had been DMing with other girls, but that was before I even started dating her. So I basically told her that she would find conversations from before we started dating. I made her promise not to get mad, and she promised. I gave her my phone and she started checking my DMs. She saw there were no new conversations, but she asked me if she could read through the other messages with other girls. I mean, some of these girls were only friends. I put my foot down and I said no to give me my phone back. She refused and started trying to read those conversations. So I snatched my phone from her hand and told her that she was being crazy. Later that night when I went to sleep, she decided to go snooping on my Instagram again. Unfortunately for her, I caught her. And when she gave me my phone back, she had changed my password. So I couldn't even get into my Instagram anymore. So of course I broke up with her and told her to leave. A few days later, my sister heard that my ex was telling everyone she broke up with me because I hit her. Everyone was believing her. She even called my boss and told him that I had been abusing her for weeks. Thankfully, my boss didn't believe her. He knows me since I was a kid and knows that I would never touch a woman like that. That's when I heard from girls on Instagram telling me that my ex was telling them to block me. And that's when I heard from Esther Tanya. 4 days ago, my sister bumped into my ex and confronted her about everything. She told my sister I cheated on her, that I hit her, and my sister punched her. She even threatened to press charges against my sister. My mom had enough and reached out to my ex's mom. By the way, my ex's mom had no idea she was doing any of this. Her mom called me and told me that she had done things like this before, and that the best thing for me to do was just to ignore her and hope that she didn't do anything else crazy. What do I do?
Story time about how I exposed my abusive, toxic boyfriend. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. My boyfriend is and has always been very charming. He has a ton of friends and everyone loves him. He's a very good-looking guy and girls are always chasing him. I met him 2 years ago at a party. I had heard a bunch of stuff about him. I heard that he was a player and that he cheated on all of his girlfriends. So when he came up to me at the party, I was really cold. I basically told him I didn't want to talk to him and that I would never give him my number. And unfortunately, this made him try even harder. He could never take no for an answer. He spent an hour trying to convince me to go to have breakfast with him the next day. He was so charming and so good looking. Of course, I eventually said yes. Even a few of his guy friends at the party told me not to go. But of course, I ended up going with him to breakfast the next day. We hung out a few times and then he told me that he liked that I wasn't easy. He told me that I was different from other girls and he asked me to be his girlfriend. I said yes because I was starting to catch feelings. One night we went out with his friends and he started calling me stupid in front of them. Part 2 is up. Part 2 of how I exposed my abusive, toxic boyfriend. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. So we went out with his friends one night and he started calling me stupid in front of them. He had never done this before and I was really surprised. I thought maybe he was just doing it to impress his guy friends. That's when I asked him straight up in front of his friends why he kept calling me stupid. One of his friends steps up and says, yeah, why do you keep calling her stupid? He stayed quiet for a second and didn't know what to say. Then he just laughed it off and said, oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize I was doing that. That's when his friends started asking me questions about myself. I told him I was studying to be an engineer and that I had graduated with top honors. Well, let's just say they were all super impressed. We finally got into his car and he was driving me home. I was upset at him, so I decided not to give him a kiss goodnight. I started getting out of the car and he grabbed my wrist really hard. He pulled me back into the car and forcefully kissed me. He said that I embarrassed him in front of his friends, but that he'd give me a pass for it. I was actually in shock. A few weeks later, we were at the mall and he pulled my hair because he said I was looking at some guy. I tried to get up and leave and he wouldn't let me. Part 3 is up. Part 3 of how I exposed my abusive, toxic boyfriend. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. So at the mall, he pulled my hair back because he thought I was looking at a guy. Then I tried to get up from the table, but he wouldn't let me. That's when he said he was going to have to control me more from now on, because clearly I was trying to look for other guys. Then he dropped me off at my dorm room and insisted on coming up. I told him I didn't want him to and that we should reconsider the relationship. I told him he needed to cool off and reconsider how he treated me. That's when he started to cry instantly. He started apologizing and told me that I was right. Then he told me that he loved me. We hadn't used that word before. I didn't realize at the time that he was totally manipulating me. And unfortunately, I decided to give him another chance. A few days later, he asked me why I didn't tell him I loved him back. I told him I just wasn't sure. Then he started yelling at me, telling me that there were so many girls ready for him to be single, and that he had a girl text him every single night, but he would say no just because of me. So I told him I loved him. After that, he was a lot nicer, until one night he slapped me. Part 4 is up. Part 4 of how I exposed my abusive, toxic boyfriend. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I sent me on Instagram. One night, he took me out to dinner and started asking me all these weird questions. He wanted to know about my last ex and why we broke up. And when I didn't give him enough information, he got really angry. When we got in his car, he slapped me and told me that I was a liar. After that, he just got worse. He would randomly just push me up against a wall if I annoyed him. He would constantly take my cell phone and start checking it. He even made me give him the password to my email. I decided that I was going to start recording all the abuse. I started recording all of our conversations and even set up a camera in my room. And of course, I had all this proof.
One day I finally told him I didn't want to be with him anymore and he threatened me. I also told him that I was going to go to the police. Then he told me I would never be able to leave him and that no one would believe me because he never left bruises. That's when he started stalking me. He would also show up at my apartment and try to force his way in. He would grab me and try to kiss me and I would just push him away. So I finally went to the police. And I also went to the head of the school. I finally got a restraining order and the school expelled him.
If you've experienced any of this, please get out of your relationship. Don't make my mistake. Story time about how I found my husband using Tinder and all the freaking dating apps. Clearly, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. Once again, I'm at the airport, sorry. My husband and I were both total sluts when we met. He was seeing like 10 girls when I first met him, and I was dating 3 guys at the time. Well, let me tell you, neither of us trusted each other, like not one bit. Eventually, he asked me to be his girlfriend, and I really wasn't sure if I wanted to say yes, but I did. He is so good looking. Like everywhere we go, we get told we're such a good looking couple. So we know we're both pretty good looking. To be fair, we were both addicted to Instagram. I would get tons of DMs from guys, and sometimes I would answer. And I know that he was getting DMs from girls, although he never told me. We dated for a year and then he asked me to marry him. Of course I said yes. I thought this was his way of telling me that he was going to commit to me 100%. After 6 months of being married, I started getting really suspicious. He would never leave his phone unattended, and if we were having dinner, he would always put his phone face down. I know you all know that's a red flag. Basically, he was hiding his phone from me like all the time. One night, we got super drunk and I made sure to wait until he fell asleep. I got on his phone and found Tinder, Bumble, and Hinge. Part 2 is up. Part 2 of how I found out my husband was using Tinder, Bumble, and Hinge all at the same time. But yeah, and cheating on me. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. So I got him drunk enough that he fell asleep. I got onto his phone and I found all the dating apps. I quickly screenshot every conversation he'd had on each of the apps. I was literally on his phone for 4 hours. Like, I didn't sleep at all that night. And the whole time I was reading his messages, I was crying. Like, I literally thought he was dedicated to me. I sent myself all of the screenshots and then deleted them from his phone. I also went through his Instagram and found a bunch of DMs from different girls. And a lot of them were big influencers. I can spill so much tea about that, by the way. I found a bunch of naked pictures from girls as well, and he even had a freaking Snapchat. At that point, I couldn't look anymore. So here's what I did. I invited both of our families to our house for dinner, ordered from a super fancy restaurant, and made sure everyone was coming. When we sat down to dinner, I told him I was going to go get my laptop. He asked me why, and I told him to give me a second. He literally thought I was going to give him a big surprise. That's when I exposed him in front of both of our families. Part 3's up. 3 of how I found out my husband was using dating apps, cheating on me, and I exposed him in front of both of our families. So as everyone is sitting down and having dinner, I start a slideshow of all the DMs, pictures that had been sent between him and all these girls. Yes, I was petty enough to make a slideshow. My husband looks at me and tells me to take it down. Of course I didn't. That's when his mom got up from her chair and slapped him straight across the face. Of course my husband started crying instantly. His dad even grabbed him by the shoulders and shook him. My family was in shock. They were so disappointed in him. Mind you, him and my mom had a great relationship. He hung out with my family all the time. That's when I asked him for a divorce and I told him I wanted everything. By the way, my husband and I own a business and he's got his own money. So I ended up taking more than half of the business, 3 out of the 4 cars that he owns, and lots of money. But here's the thing, I still love him. Even though I have my own apartment and we live separately, he comes over all the time for, you know what? Like, we still love each other and still like each other, but I can't get past the fact that he actually cheated on me. He's asking for me to go back with him, but honestly, I don't know if I should. Once a cheater, always a cheater, right? But I'm gonna expose myself. I cheated on him too. What do I do?
Story time about how I found out my roommate put cameras all over our apartment and was spying on me. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. I've been living with my roommate for 2 months now. She says she's a model, but she does a lot of other stuff. But like, if you look at her Instagram, she's a straight up model. Oh yeah, she's also trying to be an actress. Needless to say, she struggles with paying the rent. Me, on the other hand, I work in finance and I have no problem paying rent. In fact, I helped her pay for our deposit. I help her with groceries every month, so basically I treat her really well. Her and I have been friends for about 4 years now, but we were never really best friends. And to be honest with you guys, I really didn't know her very well when we moved in together. Because of COVID, I've been working from home and it's been amazing. My roommate is never home. Also, she has a lot of friends, so she's always out. Last week, she came home and installed some speakers into our living room and our kitchen. I didn't think anything about it. I was just like, okay, cool. She asked me if I wanted one for my room and I told her I'd let her know. Later on that day, I see a freaking speaker in my room. 2 days ago, I had a boy over in my house. He asked me why I had cameras all over my place. Part 2 is up. Part 2 of how I found out my roommate put cameras all over our apartment and was spying on me. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. Listen to me on Instagram. But one day I have a boy over and we're watching Netflix. That's when he starts looking around my apartment and asks me why I have cameras installed. I was like, what cameras? He's like, all those speaker things are cameras. Don't you know that? That's when I nearly had a panic attack. He grabbed them, opened them up, and showed me the camera that was inside. Like I said, my roommate told me they were speakers and she even offered to put one in my room, which she did. That's when he told me that my roommate has been spying on me and recording everything I've been doing while I've been home alone. He then suggested we go into her room and see if she had one in there. We walk into her room and start searching. That's when I get a message from my roommate. It's a picture of me and the guy in her bedroom. And she started saying that I was stealing from her room and that she was going to take legal action. Of course, being smarter than her, I know I'm not breaking any laws. When I told her that she had been recording me the whole time and that I was the one that was going to take legal action, she told me she was sending the cops over. That's when my friend opens her laptop and finds all the videos she had recorded of me. Guess what? She had been uploading them to a website where people were paying to watch me. Part 3 is up. 3 of how I found out my roommate put cameras in our apartment to record me and sell it on the internet. Disclaimers, is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. After I found all the footage on her laptop, I went straight to the cops. The cops came back with me to my apartment, and when she arrived, they arrested her. Then she started saying that she had no idea how any of that got there, and that the guy that sold the speakers, aka the cameras, to her was just some guy that she met on the street, and that she thought she was getting a good deal. She says that he was probably the one that was spying on us. But obviously, all the proof is on her laptop. She was selling my videos on 4 websites. And guess what? She was making a lot of money. She only spent 2 nights in jail. Her dad is a pretty powerful guy, so we got her out of jail. Her parents want to give me money so that I won't talk about it again because they say that it's going to ruin her future acting career. I don't know what to do. Should I accept the money and never talk about it again? Or should I expose her? I mean, she's really not famous or anything. I could take the money and expose her later on if she does become famous. But I did reach out to all her old roommates and friends and told them what she did. One of her roommates even told me she did the same thing to her. I'm also considering getting a restraining order. What do you guys think I should do? Story time about how my roommate tried to kill my dog and blame it on me. This is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. My roommate is literally the craziest person I've ever met. It's a freaking nightmare. Wait till you hear everything she's done. Her and I moved in together at the beginning of the year, so we haven't been living together for that long. But before that, I considered her one of my best friends. We would hang out all the time. Oh yeah, and she loved my dog. I had just gotten out of a relationship and I told her I wanted to find an apartment, and she suggested we live together, so of course we went and found an apartment. Things were good for the first 2 months. We had movie nights, we would cook for each other, and we would just go about our business without any problems. Luckily, I work from home, so I'm always with my dog. Whenever I have an errand to run, I'll just leave her in my room and she usually sleeps. A month ago, I come home and I hear my roommate yelling at my dog. But my roommate didn't realize I was home. When she saw me, she picked up my dog and pretended that she was just joking. I did not like it at all, so I confronted her and I asked her why she was yelling at my dog. She said she wasn't and that I must have heard wrong. The following day, she went to work and left the door open. My dog was about to run out and we live on a busy street. Part 2 is up. Part 2 of how my roommate tried to kill my dog and blame it on me. Disclaimers, is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. So my crazy roommate started leaving our front door open, knowing very well that my dog could escape at any moment, and we lived on a busy street, God forbid. So I would constantly tell my roommate to stop leaving the door open. That's when she told me that she doesn't know how that's happening and that somebody else must be doing it. This girl was literally trying to convince me that someone was opening our door on purpose. So I finally decided to confront my roommate. I asked her why she was leaving the door open and why she yelled at my dog. And then she confessed that she actually hates dogs. She thinks they're gross and they don't belong in a house. She also told me that she always pretended to like my dog so that I wouldn't get offended. I told her that I thought the best thing for us was for me to move out. She starts to cry and begs me not to leave. She told me that she'll try to tolerate my dog more. After that, she gave me a printed sheet of paper with rules on it. Basically all the things my dog can't do. For example, my dog can't hang out in the living room or even sit on the couch, which she always did. And the biggest rule of all, she did not want her in the bathroom or the kitchen. She wanted her to be in my room all day. This is where it gets scary. Part 3 is Part 3 of how my crazy roommate tried to kill my dog. Disclaimers, is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. When she gave me all the new rules of how my dog had to behave, I told her I was definitely moving out. That's when she told me that she wished my dog was dead. She told me that my dog was coming in between her and my relationship. Ew. I literally had to sit her down and explain to her that my dog is like my child. I love my dog so much. I would do anything for my dog. Then she asked me if I loved her. I was like, yes, of course I love you, but my dog is like my child. So if I need to move out, I will. Then she gave me the silent treatment. A few days later, I tell her I'm going to go to my friend's house. I get in my car and drive away, but I realize I forgot something, so I drive back home. That's when I walk into the apartment and I see my roommate holding my dog over the balcony. She was literally about to drop her. I grabbed my dog and I ran away. I went straight to the police and I filed a restraining order. The police went to talk to her and she told them that I was the one that tried to throw my dog over. Thankfully, the police don't believe her, but now I have to find a place to live. How am I going to go to my apartment and get all my stuff? What should I do?
Story time about how I set up my boyfriend to cheat on me so that I could break up with him. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. I'm at the airport, so I'm sorry if it's noisy. My boyfriend and I have been together for way too long. When our relationship first started, I was constantly chasing him. He never wanted a relationship and basically didn't want to commit to me. So basically, he was trying to be an F-boy while he was with me. And of course, I let him do whatever he wanted because I was too afraid to lose him. I didn't want to be that annoying, nagging girlfriend, so I just never said anything to him. Fast forward 5 years. I've had a huge glow up since we started dating. I lost weight, I got super fit at the gym, like I have abs now. I opened up my own nail salon, and I even got myself a car and a house. Well, let's just say that he stayed the same. In fact, he has no ambitions to getting a better job or anything, and it really annoys me. He started talking about getting married, and I was like, hell nah. But I don't know how to tell him that I don't want to be with him anymore. I mean, I love him, but I just don't want to be with him anymore. And because I'm too much of a coward to actually break up with him, I set him up to cheat on me. I found this girl on Instagram, and I told her to DM my boyfriend. He DM'd her back. Part 2 is up. Part 2 of how I got my boyfriend to cheat on me so that I could break up with him. So I got this girl on Instagram to DM him, and this girl was totally his type. Basically, she looked like me, but with blonde hair. So she sent him a little DM. He wasted no time and he got back to her. That same day, they set up a freaking date. So I told this girl that all she had to do was go out with him, like meet him at a restaurant, but that was it. Little did I know that she had a crush on him. And it makes sense now thinking about it because my friend recommended her, and my friend afterward told me that she actually had a crush on him. A few days later, she sent me a picture of him sleeping in her bed without a shirt on, and she basically tells me everything that happened. So now I have all this proof. But guess what? I actually got really pissed. It broke my heart because I didn't expect him to do that. And he was totally avoiding all my calls and messages. He finally came over to my house, and that's when I showed him all of the receipts, all the pictures and messages between him and the girl. That's when he told me that she drugged him and forced him into doing it. Of course, I knew that wasn't true. Then he pulls out a ring and asked me to marry him. That's when he got on his knees and started begging. Part 3 is up. Part 3 of how I set up my boyfriend to cheat on me so that I could break up with him. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. As he's begging on his hands and knees for me to marry him, that's a call from the girl that he cheated on me with. He puts the phone in his pocket and he started acting all nervous, so that's how I knew. That's when I told him to show me his phone. Then he ran to the bathroom and threw it into the toilet. Then he locked himself in my bathroom and basically begged me for 3 hours to stay with him. Told me that he would never be able to find anyone as good as I was, and that he loved me and blah 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 blah. At this point I told him I was going to call the cops to get him out, but I just couldn't bring myself to it. I really felt bad for him. I mean, after all, I did set him up. He eventually left and I didn't speak to him for a few weeks. A few days ago, I actually started talking to this new guy. He's been super flaky, and every time we decide to go out, he always bails. So now I'm thinking maybe I should take my ex back. He sent me flowers, but I've been trying to ignore him. But my parents don't want me to get back with him. Part of me thinks that he was probably already cheating on me. I mean, he DM'd that girl really quick. I honestly don't know what to do, and I'm even starting to feel guilty about what I did. At the same time, he totally shouldn't have cheated. What do you guys think I should do?
Story time about how I ended up with 2 sugar daddies that I met at the strip club. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It's sent to me on Instagram. I have been a tripper for 2 years. And yes, I will be referring to myself as a tripper. A few months ago, I started looking for new ways to earn money because I don't want to be a tripper for the rest of my life. Well, around that time, a group of guys came into the club. One of them was super nice and he kept tipping me all night. He literally just talked to me the whole night. He didn't even get dances from other girls and didn't ask me to do anything else other than just talk. I basically made my entire rent just from all the tips he gave me. By the end of the night, he had asked me for my number and I gave it to him, which is super uncommon. I never give out my number, but this guy was really nice. A few days later, we went out to dinner and he asked me if I wanted to be his sugar baby. I said yes immediately. Ever since then, we hang out once a week and he pays me on average $4,000 a month. A few months into our arrangement, he asked me if I wanted to quit the strip club. I said probably not, but he told me that eventually he wanted me to. A few weeks ago, this new guy comes into the club and he also asked me to be his sugar baby, so I said yes. This is where things get scary. Part 2 is up. Part 2 of how I ended up with 2 sugar daddies I met at the trip club. Now I basically have to choose between one of them. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. So this other guy comes into the club and asked me if I want to be a sugar baby. I immediately said yes. This man owned several businesses and everyone knew him around town. A week into our arrangement, he started becoming really jealous. He was constantly asking me if I had a boyfriend or if I had other sugar daddies. Of course I said no. That's when I realized I had to hide everything from both of these guys. Luckily, the second sugar daddy traveled a lot. He would FaceTime me all the time and even asked me to turn on my location. The only reason I put up with it was because he was giving me $7,000 a month. That's when sugar daddy number 1 asked me to quit the club again. And I basically said yes because I was getting enough money. I didn't realize it then, but he basically took that as me saying that I wanted to be in a relationship with him. That's when he started wanting to come over to my place all the time and basically spend every single day with me. So I would tell him I was going to the gym, but really I was going to go see my other sugar daddy. Then sugar daddy number 2 asked me if I wanted to move into a better apartment, and he became my co-signer. Part 3 is up. Part 3 of how I ended up with 2 sugar daddies and I had to choose between one of them. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I was sent to me on Instagram. So sugar daddy number 2 offers me an apartment and wants to be my co-signer. And the apartment was so beautiful. It was 2 bedrooms, had a washer dryer inside the unit. It even had a doorman and a pool and everything. It was a huge step up from the place I had. This is when sugar daddy number 1 started getting really suspicious. He asked me how I could afford it. Then I broke the news to him that I had a second sugar daddy. He freaked out and told me I needed to choose between him or the other guy. I can't tell sugar daddy number 2 because he's super jealous, but my gut tells me to go with sugar daddy number 2. He pays me more money and gave me the apartment, but number 1 is super nice. But number 2 travels all the time, so I don't have to see him all the time. I don't know. What do you guys think I should do? I love my new apartment though. What do I do?
We're wandering bodies, stumbling side by side, sharing a bottle on a soul all night. We missed the last loop and the bus has gone. So now our only chance is wandering on. I've got you, hey, and you got me. So let's see, hey, where freedom leads, and we'll still hear the birds out singing while both our ears are ringing. No, tonight we're going higher.
Move your grandson and let your niece live there. I have 2 brothers. We're 5 years apart, so when I ran off to see the world, baby brother 50 was 8 years old. Not the brother I'm talking about though. This is middle brother who is 55. Our great-grandfather was an actual coal baron. He owned several mines, had his own trucks, and even a spur RR line to send the coal to the main tracks. Our grandfather bought land alongside a main river and built a coal tipple to load the coal and others onto barges to be sent downriver to where it was needed. Before he died, grandfather sold it all. It was in the late 1960s. Kept enough money for him and grandmother, and then the rest was put into trusts for kids and grandkids. At age 21, I was given $322,000. I bought a car and a motorcycle, and then thanks to my grandmother's wise advice, I forgot that I had it. I just left it in the trust. That was until she found the farm for sale, so I snapped it up. The house needed work, so I brought everything up to code and put a lot of insulation in. Later on, I bought one of those half-round steel garages, and over the years, it's been turned into a living space. Quite nice. People call it the cave. A buddy sprayed a few inches of foam on the walls and we painted it grey. It's tucked back into the tree line and needs no AC in the summer. Heat is a wood-burning stove. Plenty of wood too. Wireless, great digital TV signals. Several friends and family members have stayed there when they needed a place. Since the property is far closer to my grandson's high school than their house, my daughter let him and a buddy live there for almost 3 years. He starts college at the same school that my niece is going to for graduate school. She needed a place to stay, and her mom asked me, and I said of course. The problem started 2 days ago with the grandson calling, asking if I told my brother him and his friend had to move into the half-round and give the house to his cousin and a previously unmentioned friend. Oh, no. I didn't, so he told his uncle to F off and handed the phone to MB. After a very short argument on how unsatisfactory it was for his golden child and how bratty my grandson was, they left. When he hung up on me, I texted his wife and said the deal was off thanks to MB. I answered one text from her explaining what happened. I refused to answer MB's calls or texts asking me to change my mind. BB called me laughing. MB called him on the verge of tears, begging for him to change my mind. So he did beg me. Begged me to charge them the standard rate for rent for this. With utilities included, that would be around $12,000 a year. Get the first and last, plus sign a 2-year lease. His wife, my sister-in-law, is a lawyer. She'll write a great lease. And he said that she offered. Now, long ago, my sister-in-law came to ask me if her friend, a victim of domestic abuse, could hide there. You don't say no to that, but to her, it was an act of kindness, and she could find nowhere else at the time. I told my baby brother to have her draw it up, and I sent it. I made grandson the landlord. My baby brother and sister-in-law got to work on it, and every base is covered. My middle brother has the lease, but I've not heard back. Our mother would be mad at me, and my dad would laugh. He is still alive, but dementia took his mind and memories. And in the comments, OP says, I put a lot of run-on sentences in that, didn't I? Sorry, folks. I'm old. Get off my lawn. I still tracked it, though. The bit with your sister-in-law offering to, and then subsequently actually drawing up the lease, made me snicker coffee out my schnoz. What the hell? So to recap. You own a farm with a house and a mother-in-law unit / ADU. You let your grandson live in the house for the back half of high school and now for college. Middle brother's daughter, your niece, asked to live there for college and you said yes. Niece and your middle brother then demanded the farmhouse rather than the mother-in-law unit and pitched a fit when you said, ha, no? Middle brother is now having a fit. You and youngest brother wrote up a formal lease naming your grandson as a landlord. Nasty piece of work niece, by the way of middle brother, has not responded. Our next post is by user I have no idea 098, titled, Entitled Racist Karen Wants Other Parents' Children. So a few years ago, I was a student studying in childcare. Now, as a part of my course, I am meant to 1 day a week work in a private nursery. For people who don't know what a nursery is, it's basically preschool, I think, to get some experience. So whilst I was there for a year, I became very close with the staff members and the children that were there. And during the summer, a new child was enrolled into the nursery. The little girl, we will call her Mary because her favorite song was Mary Has a Little Lamb. Now, Mary is an adorable little girl who likes to jump around and give everyone hugs and kisses. A bowl of fluff is what she is. Mary is a bit slightly chubby for a 3-year-old, but that's okay. No problem with a little bit of chub. But her mum thought otherwise. Her mum, who we'll name Karen, is this tall white lady who is American who moved to our country last year. Mary didn't look anything like Karen. Mary is a black child, but that isn't a problem to us since everyone's families come in different sizes and shapes. But I had to point this out since it'll become important later. The nursery closes at around 6 p.m. since we're a private nursery. But Karen always comes late by an hour to pick up Mary. Now, usually, we would give the parents an hour time limit to pick up the children before we hand out warnings. And if a third warning is invoked, well, I think the manager said she'll call Child Protective Services. Now, Karen always takes the piss and ensures she picks up Mary barely before the hour, looking like a, excuse my choice of words, an HOE. She would show up with her flush red face, a tight, slim, skinny dress that shows off either her cleavage or ass, and caked in an excessive amount of makeup. Now, this isn't a big deal until the summer trip starts coming around the corner. It was a trip to a big theme park in my country. Everyone was buzzed, especially the staff members, since this is basically a free trip for them since the nursery is paying for it. The children will be with their parents or guardians, so we didn't have to take care of them and just go wild with alcohol on the rides. On the day of the trip, Karen came along as usual in a tight dress, high heels, pungent perfume, and excessive amounts of makeup. She looks like she dressed for some sort of a formal party, whilst the other parents are dressed in casual clothing, preparing themselves for war. Remember, our staff members don't have to look after the kids on this trip, and it's the parents' and guardians' responsibility to do so. Before we left off for our trip, Karen noticed one of the children, a beautiful toddler whom I'll name Anna, with blonde pigtails and bright blue eyes. Karen walked up to her mother, whom she held hands with, and said something quite disturbing, to the point Anna's mother requested to our staff to help keep a distance from her. The exchange went as follows. Karen: "That's a cute girl." AM: "Aw, thank you. She's our pride and joy." Karen: "She has such beautiful crystal blue eyes and blonde hair. Her skin is so fair and pale." AM: Yeah, she is beautiful. A bit creeped out though." Karen: "I wish Mary looked like her." AM looks at Mary and says, "Aw, Mary is also a beautiful girl too." Karen scoffs and says, "Yeah, right. If anything, I want a baby girl like yours." She looks closer at Anna and strokes her blonde hair. Anna's mother was creeped out by that and pulled Anna away from Karen before quickly heading to us for some help. With our help, we assigned Karen and Mary to sit at the very back of the bus, whilst Anna's family sat in the front to keep some distance. Once we got to the theme park, everyone was let loose and the parents and guardians are in for a treat. Whilst our staff and students went nuts on the rides and the alcohol, basically just having a blast. Until it was nearing the late afternoon. We were all getting hungry, so we walked over to the food court. There we saw an unpleasant sight. Karen was drinking some beer at one of the far back tables talking on her phone, whilst Mary was asleep in her buggy. We looked at this scene with disgust and walked over. The exchange went as followed after Karen noticed us and put down the phone. Karen: "Oh, hello there." Me: "Hello, Karen. Enjoying the trip?" Karen: "Oh, geez, I wish. It's been so boring, tiring, and my feet aches from walking around and it's so bloody hot." She was wearing a tight black dress and tall black heels. Of course she's gonna get tired. Me: "I see. Did you two enjoy any of the rides?" Karen: "Yes. Mary enjoys the merry-go-ride more than anything." I want to note that there was no merry-go-round in the theme park. I sat myself, along with 2 other staff members, with Karen to get to know her and see if she was okay, because I can tell she was kinda tipsy with her skin all flushed. We kept an eye out for her and just kept talking and drinking until things finally took a turn for the worst. She talked about things we couldn't believe. Karen. You know, I never wanted a child, but my husband adopted Mary from one of his African trips because according to him, he felt like he had to, and he sees her as his own flesh and blood. She scoffs as she drinks more. The husband is a journalist who travels a lot. Me. That's nice of him. I'm sure Mary will grow up to be a healthy, beautiful girl. Karen scoffs again. Yeah, beautiful my ass. Back in America, beautiful white girls are always the most popular ones in high school. And she mumbles something quietly. Me? Pardon? Karen. Her skin is black. I wonder if there was a bruise, would anyone be able to see it? Me. And I look at the 2 other staff members with worry. But they nodded as they quickly rushed over to Mary to check if she was okay and see if there were any signs of abuse while I kept Karen occupied with idle talk. Luckily, Mary didn't have any signs of abuse, but since Karen was a bit tipsy and tired, one of the staff members took Karen back to the bus to rest while the bus driver kept a close eye on her. We took Mary after getting a drunk consent from Karen and took her on child rides that she would enjoy, like the elephant ride, the airplane, and the baby roller coaster and more. We still had our fun until it was time to gather back at the meeting point around the evening. We quickly informed the manager what we had heard and expressed our concern, and the manager took it into consideration. Once we got back, apparently the manager contacted Karen's husband and informed him of what has been said and how she's been treating Mary, and also to pick up Karen since she was tipsy. I'm not sure what the husband did after learning all of that. The very next week, Karen came into the nursery quite early, which was unusual to pick up Mary. Anna and her mother was passing by in the hallway to go home when suddenly Karen grabbed Anna by the arm and screamed, "I want this child! Give her to me!" AM says, "What the hell is wrong with you? Let go!" All the staff members quickly rushed over to the scene to pull Karen away. Anna was crying in pain and fear with her mother grabbing her away from Karen and hugged her protectively. Karen says, "I deserve a beautiful white child. Give her to me. She's mine. I want a beautiful baby girl." We restrained her with 3 men holding her down, and we quickly contacted the police and her husband. Everyone was informed to leave early that day, including the cleaners, especially since I was a student. I left early because of the ruckus, but some stayed back to give a witness statement. Afterwards, according to one of the staff members, Karen's husband argued like hell with Karen in the nursery's office and basically threatened to divorce her, which got Karen crying. Karen's husband took Mary, with Karen basically hugging him by the leg, begging him not to leave her and that she was sorry. For a month, instead of Karen picking up Mary, it was either Mary's nanny or the husband. According to one of the nosy staff members, the husband had divorced Karen and got a restraining order against her because apparently when the husband went to visit Karen in jail, she tried to attack him for prioritizing Mary over her, and Anna's mum also sued her and got a restraining order. I'm not sure what happened to Karen afterwards, but I hope she never has children of her own. Also, Mary is being well taken care of by her loving father, who treats her like a treasure regardless of skin color, and thinks that she's a beautiful baby girl. A lot of the staff members had a crush on him after this incident, lol. And edit, I forgot to add that not all white Americans are like Karen. I only included her background of being American because she kept on talking about her time in America and how in high school it's only the pretty white girls that are popular and good looking. No hate towards white American peeps. Now in the comments, anyone who treats children this way deserves the worst. I hope her ovaries dry, her hair falls, and her makeup is always a mess. What a bee. No, you should wish on her sudden explosive diarrhea while stuck in a traffic jam with frequent sneezes. Our next post is by user CautiousAd47, titled, "You should have bought me an apartment." This story is of an entitled aunt, and it dates back a couple of years. Since then, we broke contact and barely see each other. Backstory. My mum has 3 siblings, one of which is an entitled sister. Let's call her Karen. Aunt Karen is a grown woman, at the time in her late 40s, with a husband and a child, who is my cousin. When my cousin was young, Karen's husband was drinking a lot and basically ruining the life of all of them. She, as a hypocritical Christian, usually only uses the church when it helps her, didn't want to divorce him, because my grandparents would disapprove and stop helping her with money. During this time, they constantly supported her with money so that she can pay her husband's debt, rent, food, etc. She sometimes even lied to them and asked for money for food for the kid while just paying out his debts. My grandpa was still working after he retired, so they were able to support her. The husband eventually stopped drinking, and they started building a huge house, so she had to work abroad to get more money to pay for the mortgage. Around that time, my mum and dad decided to buy the house built by my grandparents. They basically offered every child, mum plus 3 siblings, to buy it. Karen, as the oldest daughter, was offered it first, but she rejected the offer, and my mum and dad were the only ones that took the offer. My grandparents split the money into 4 equal amounts, giving each kid, besides my mum, the same amount, and keeping one part themselves, as my mum's part was included in the lowered price of the house. All of their kids were grown-ups with families, so they figured it's better to give them the money now and not after they die. Each kid received the amount that would cover about 70% of the price of a 2-bedroom apartment in the same city, so a fairly decent amount at the time. And if they took a mortgage, it would already be paid for. One sibling of my mum did exactly this and bought a flat. The other one already had a flat, so their family bought some cars and kept the rest. Karen invested the money in their new house, but since it was huge, it drained a lot of money, and they were basically just taking more and more mortgages to pay out the ones before, which also required them to build more and more to get the money released. Basically just paying debt with loaned money all over, and then paying huge amounts on interest. Since they were getting older and the banks didn't want to give them money anymore, they had a hard time, and she had to work long hours to pay for it. During all this time, my grandpa, as a construction worker before he retired, was giving them a lot of free expensive equipment to help with the building, and still some money to pay for the mortgage, etc. And now on to the actual story. A couple of months after my grandpa died, we met at their house for a birthday party of my cousin. My dad couldn't come at the time, so it was just me and my mum and all the families of siblings and grandma. After grandma went home, because she never stayed long at any party, and a couple glasses of wine, my aunt Karen started speaking to my mum. It started lightly with her complaining about the money they have to pay for the mortgages, to which my mum reacted by shrugging her shoulders, because she knew it's only their own fault they started to build this huge house with just one kid, that will probably not even want to live there in the future anyway. And then, like a blizzard, the entitled Karen started blaming us for her situation, telling my mum that it's her fault because my mum didn't buy her an apartment after we bought the house. My mum got very confused, as she didn't expect the sudden change of mood and the hostility created by my aunt Karen. She told us that if we bought her an apartment, she wouldn't have to work so much, and it's only our fault they have debts, and if we bought them an apartment, they would be better off. My mum got angry and told her it's just her fault that she can't manage their own budget, even though she has a degree in economics. Karen started screaming with hate in her eyes that we owe her an apartment, completely ignoring the fact that she received a huge amount of money from my grandparents before, and it was only her fault that she didn't invest it properly and started building a huge house instead of buying an apartment that could have already been paid for. It was not my mum's concern how she uses the money, and she became very sad, since out of all of her siblings, Aunt Karen was her favorite before. She was sad that her sister felt so hurt for all those years saying nothing and pretending all the love while keeping so much hate in her. She also said that even the late grandpa said that she should have received an apartment, which was not true, and my grandma confirmed that it was false, because she received money from them because of their own decision, and not because anyone was obliged to give her any money since they were still alive and the money she received was instead of inheritance money. After this, we left and went home. My dad was furious when we were telling him the story and knew that she only said anything because he wasn't present. He forbid her to enter our house, and we never visited them since then. This story is a little longer, but it shows an example of a person that can blame her own family for her own poor life decisions. Now in the comments, Just Peachy says, a common trait of a narcissist is that they don't take responsibility. It's always somebody else's fault while they're in a situation they're in. Sounds like your mum or family is just one of the possible many targets to choose from and point the finger. Karen is a scam artist. If a person proposes something illogical, then gets emotional and angry as a smokescreen to hide the fact that their proposal is illogical, it is a scam. And Opie replies, I guess that she should be happy that the Indian scam centers don't target my country and she doesn't speak English, or else they would already be on the street. Or maybe she should start doing the calls herself, because she clearly is entitled to a better life in a villa with a huge pool.